the first video of 2016, a whole new year! And I did this video last year and I really enjoyed it, so obviously I'm gonna do it again. I keep a record of all the books that I read. I finished this year and I had to move on to another book to keep like a record of all the books that I read. But yeah, I tallied it all up and I read 74 books this year, which is so many more than I thought I had, because I always feel like I'm, you know, constantly beating myself up for not reading enough. But I read about, you know, on average, a little under like 1.5 books a week, which is really good. 12 of those were rereads, 33 were fiction, 18 were non-fiction, 10 were graphic novels. Keeping a book journal also means that I can do this chronologically, which is quite nice. So, my first book, my first favourite book of 2015, I don't have a copy of because I borrowed it from my friend Kerry, but it is Burial Rites by Hannah Kent, which blew me away. It is one of the hands down most beautiful books I have ever read. I do need to get my own copy of it actually because it's just stunning. You should definitely read it, especially if you have like any interest in the way that places can be evoked in fiction, because god do I want to visit Iceland now. Book number the second, Bird by Anne Lammot. And I think one of the reasons that this is one of my favourite books is just the way that it feels. It's got a really nice matte cover and it's very bendy, which just makes it very pleasant to read. It's sort of autobiographical, sort of writing instructions, which is why I picked it up for the writing instructions. Sort of embarrassingly, I haven't actually read anything that Anne Lammot has written. Apart from this, I should read some of her fiction. But it was really, really good on its own. Shelter by Frances Greenslade. This is another book that really had a sense of place. It's set in Canada. There was a real sense of stuff just happening and no one being able to stop it. You know, life just kept happening and there was no control Maggie had over it at all, which was heartbreaking but very true, you know. It was a really, really good book. Two Boys Kissing by David Levithan, which I have as a Kindle copy but not as a physical copy, sadly. This is like the start of a gay theme in the books that I read this year. It's narrated by the victims of the AIDS epidemic, so it's narrated by a sort of collective of gay men, and it's about modern gay boys in America. I don't think I'd read anything that had a sort of overarching, it's like a collective voice telling the story, and it just, oh man, it made me very emotional. And it also leads neatly into the next book, which is Tell the Wolves I'm Home by Rifka Brunt. Gosh, don't you love that cover? Isn't it gorgeous? It's so beautiful. It's about a girl whose uncle is gay and he dies, and she strikes up a relationship with his boyfriend who she never knew existed while he was alive, and it's about the effect that it has on her and it has on her family. So good. Oh my gosh. The Lies of Lamora by Lynch. This is probably one of the first like pure fantasy books that I read for a long time. I've read a lot of kind of fantasy elements in the real world sort of books. Like I wouldn't call Harry Potter pure fantasy, you know what I mean? Because it's still set partially in our world. But this is, you know, in a completely different universe. And it's so good. I just got swept up and carried away in it. If you like Terry Pratchett, this is sort of the same kind of funny style, but also super brutal. Lamora is basically, he and his little group of friends, the Gentlemen Bastards, are a group of con men in an era where, you know, confidence trickery hasn't really been a thing before now. If you have even a passing interest in fantasy, go for it. And you know, great cons. There were so many bits that made me like reach out to Aiden and say, you've got to read this, you listen to this bit, it's fucking brilliant. Book number 7, Tales of the City by Amistad Maupin. I think that's how it's pronounced. Maupin? This is a series of books that has been around for a long time. It's set in San Francisco in the 70s, I want to say. It is like a masterclass in how to do characters. Everyone is so fully realised in such a short space of time. It's incredible. Very funny, very, very, very clever and good. They're super popular and still in print for a reason, you know? 8th book I don't have with me because I borrowed it from Jess, but it's Just Kids by Patti Smith, her memoir. I think I mentioned it in another video of mine a little while back, so I won't go into it too much, but it's just a fascinating book. The Discovery of France by Robb. I'd read his biography of Victor Hugo for my university course in my last year, and I'm, you know, still huge Les Mis trash, so France. But this was really interesting. I got his other book about just Paris, and that wasn't as good, but this was brilliant. I'd always thought of France as kind of like being the same as England in a lot of ways. It's basically England but across the channel in terms of its general history of, you know, countryside, farmers, towns, industrial revolution, cities, that sort of thing, but like they didn't even have a unified language until fairly recently. It was just like so much that I didn't know. There are also some fantastic photos. I think that's my favourite one. I hope that focuses or that you can see that properly. They're shepherds on stilts. Next book, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I watched the first few episodes of the TV adaptation on the BBC before reading this, and then I read all of this and then finished it off. Damn, it's so good. I love the style of it, especially because it's done in a sort of classic style, like Jane Austen or Charles Dickens, and there are just a bunch of footnotes, and it's that sort of magical realism that I absolutely adore, where there's the idea that magic has always existed in our world and is just a part of the like national consciousness. The only disappointing thing was like how UK centred it was, but I loved that, you know, all of the most powerful magic came from up north. This is book like 11 or something. I have a lot of favourite books. It was difficult to narrow this list down, but yes, anyway, Sodomy in the Pirate Tradition by Barry R. Burg. I think that's Barry. That's B for Barrett. I got this when I went to London with my friend Felix, and we went to the bookshop in Pride, like Gaze the Word. I'd heard Stephen Fry talk about this book on an episode of QI, and I found it in that shop and I was like, oh my gosh, look, Sodomy in the Pirate Tradition! And some guy who worked there yelled from the back, that's a great book! And it is. It's really interesting. And it challenged a lot of what I thought the history of what public perception of sodomy and buggery and homosexuality was in the 17th century. It was just marvellous. So yeah, all of the Pirates of the Caribbean, super gay, 100%. Typical, the camera cuts me off just before the last book, which is Writing a Woman's Life by Carolyn G. Heilbrun? Heilbrun, I think that's how you pronounce it. This was a book that my granddad gave me because my granny read it before she wrote a sort of mini autobiography of her own. It was just so engaging, and it's made me really want to brush up on my feminist history, to be honest, because for an English lit student, I have huge gaps in my knowledge of English history, really. I've never read any Virginia Woolf, for example. Kind of embarrassing. Despite being published in the 80s, being written primarily about women in the 20s to 50s, there was a lot of it that was still very applicable to today's situation when it comes to feminism. Particularly in regards to, there was a big section on marriage and successful relationships and creative relationships. And it sort of, you know, struck home for me that the narrative of women's lives are still assumed to be the same. You know, a lot of women are generally assumed to follow the narrative of work, but also then marriage and children. But yeah, it was really interesting. I don't know how easy it would be for anyone to get their hands on it because I don't think it's in print anymore, but you could still look in libraries and on stuff like Abe Books and Amazon. Tell me what your favourite books of 2015 were, and any recommendations if you've read these. If you want to read these, tell me all. Happy 2016, guys! Bye! And also check out this fantastic cushion that Aiden's stepmom gave me. Yes, what a good, it's actually super comfortable. I love it.